Before we begin tonight's terrifying true story, I want you to think about what it feels like to be completely alone in a large building at night. Maybe you've worked late in an office or been the last person in a school or hospital. There's something unsettling about those vast empty spaces. The way sounds echo differently, the way shadows seem to move when they shouldn't. But what happens when you discover you weren't actually alone at all? Tonight's story comes from a night security guard in Seattle who learned that sometimes the most frightening thing isn't supernatural activity, but the realization that another human being has been sharing your space without your knowledge. As I tell you this story, consider how vulnerable we are when we assume we're safe in our solitude and how easily someone could be living right under our noses. My name is Mike, and for 6 months I worked as a night security guard at the Cascadia Financial Center, a 20-story office building in downtown Seattle. It was my first security job, and I was grateful for the work even though the hours were brutal. My shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Monday through Friday, and during those 8 hours, I was the only person in the entire building. Or at least, that's what I was supposed to believe. The Cascadia Financial Center was typical of Seattle's downtown corporate architecture, built in the early 2000s with lots of glass, steel, and that sterile modern aesthetic that looks impressive during the day, but feels cold and unwelcoming at night. During business hours, the building housed about 800 employees across various financial services companies, consulting firms, and tech startups. But after 6 p.m., the place emptied out completely, leaving just me and 20 floors of vacant office space. My job was straightforward: monitor the security cameras, make hourly rounds through each floor, log any unusual incidents, and ensure that the building remained secure until the cleaning crew arrived at 6 a.m. The building management company had briefed me on the basic systems, given me master keys and security codes, and assured me that night security was mostly about maintaining a presence rather than dealing with actual problems. The first week went exactly as expected. The building was quiet, peaceful even, with nothing more exciting than the occasional delivery truck or police patrol car visible through the lobby windows. I spent most of my time at the security desk in the lobby, reading books and monitoring the array of camera feeds that showed empty hallways, vacant office spaces, and the loading dock where nothing ever happened after business hours. The security system was fairly sophisticated, with cameras on every floor and motion sensors throughout the building. The elevators were programmed to remain on the ground floor unless activated by a key card, and all exterior doors were secured with electronic locks that could only be opened from inside or with proper authorization. It seemed like a fortress of corporate security designed to keep unauthorized people out and ensure that someone like me could easily monitor the entire building from a single location. It was during my second week that I first noticed the elevators moving on their own. I'd be sitting at the security desk reading or checking my phone when I'd hear the distinctive sound of elevator doors opening and closing, followed by the mechanical hum of the car moving between floors. The first few times it happened, I assumed there must be some kind of automatic maintenance cycle that I hadn't been told about. But when I checked the security camera feeds, I couldn't see anyone getting on or off the elevators. The cars would simply move to different floors, seemingly at random, then return to the lobby level. When I mentioned it to my supervisor during our weekly check-in, he assured me that the elevators sometimes performed automatic diagnostic routines and that I shouldn't be concerned unless I actually saw unauthorized people using them. The explanation made sense, but it didn't account for the other strange occurrences that began happening around the same time. Lights would turn on in office spaces that should have been completely dark, usually on floors between the 10th and 15th levels. The motion sensor lighting system was supposed to activate only when someone was physically present, but I'd see entire sections of offices illuminated on my camera feeds, without any visible cause. During my nightly rounds, I'd take the elevator to the floors where I'd seen lights activate, but by the time I arrived, everything would be dark again. I'd walk through the cubicles and offices with my flashlight, checking for signs of entry or disturbance, but never found anything out of place. Doors remained locked, windows were secure, and there were no obvious explanations for the electrical activity. The most unsettling part was how the building felt different. During these incidents, when I'd walk through floors where lights had been mysteriously activated, there was a sense that someone had recently been there. It's hard to describe, but the air felt warmer, as if body heat was still dissipating, and sometimes there were subtle smells that suggested human presence. coffee, cologne, or that indefinable scent of someone who'd been sitting at a desk for hours. I started paying closer attention to the security camera feeds, watching for patterns in the mysterious elevator movements and lighting activations. What I discovered was deeply troubling. The incidents always occurred in the same general area of the building, primarily on floors 13 through 16, and they seemed to follow a schedule that suggested someone was maintaining regular habits, rather than random building malfunctions. The elevators would typically activate around 1 a.m., moving to the 15th floor and remaining there for 30 to 45 minutes before returning to the lobby. During those same time periods, lights would turn on in specific offices on floors 14 and 15, always in the same configuration that suggested someone was moving through a familiar routine. Most disturbing, the pattern occurred almost every night, suggesting ongoing occupancy rather than occasional intrusion. 3 weeks into the job, I decided to conduct a more thorough investigation of the suspicious floors. Instead of taking the elevator directly to the areas where activity had been detected, I used the stairwell to approach more quietly, hoping to catch whoever or whatever was causing the disturbances. I climbed 14 flights of stairs, moving as quietly as possible, and positioned myself to observe the 15th floor from the stairwell entrance. What I saw through the stairwell door window made my blood run cold. There were definitely lights on in the main office area, but more importantly, I could see the glow of computer monitors. Several workstations appeared to be active, with screens displaying what looked like email applications or web browsers. Someone was clearly using the building's computer systems during hours when the internet was supposed to be disconnected and all workstations powered down. I waited in the stairwell for nearly an hour, watching the computer activity and trying to determine if anyone was physically present at the workstations. The screens would change periodically, suggesting active use rather than just computers that had been left running. But I never saw a human figure, just the telltale signs that someone was working at those computers in what should have been a completely vacant building. When I finally worked up the courage to enter the 15th floor and investigate more closely, I discovered something that shook me to my core. One of the computer workstations had been clearly customized for regular use. There was a coffee mug, personal papers, a small desk lamp that hadn't been there during my previous inspections, and most disturbingly, food wrappers and water bottles that indicated someone had been eating meals at that desk. The computer itself was logged into email accounts and websites that definitely weren't related to any of the businesses that rented space in the building. Someone had been using this workstation as their personal computer, treating it like their own private office space during overnight hours when the building was supposed to be completely secure and empty. I immediately called my supervisor, but reaching him at 2 a.m. proved impossible. I left detailed voicemails explaining what I'd discovered and requesting immediate guidance on how to proceed. Should I contact the police? Should I try to confront whoever was using the building illegally? Should I simply monitor the situation and wait for management guidance during business hours? While I waited for a response, I decided to review the security camera footage from previous nights more carefully. The building's system stored digital recordings for up to 30 days, which gave me the opportunity to look for patterns and evidence that I might have missed during real-time monitoring. What I found in those recordings was even more disturbing than the evidence of computer use. By reviewing the footage systematically, I could track the movement of someone who had clearly been living in the building for an extended period. The person was careful to avoid most cameras, but occasionally I could catch glimpses of a figure moving through less monitored areas like stairwells and storage closets. More importantly, the recordings revealed how this person had been gaining access to the building and evading detection. They appeared to be hiding in one of the large storage areas on the 16th floor during daytime hours, then emerging after the cleaning crew left at around 10 p.m. They would use the freight elevator, which had fewer security cameras, to move between floors and conduct their activities during the hours when I was supposedly monitoring the building. The realization that someone had been living in the building while I was responsible for security was both terrifying and humiliating. This person had been sharing the space with me for weeks, using building resources, accessing computer systems, and essentially treating the place as their home, while I remained completely unaware of their presence. My supervisor returned my call around 6 a.m. just as the cleaning crew was arriving. When I explained what I'd discovered, his reaction was immediate and serious. He instructed me to secure the 15th floor, document everything I'd found, and wait for building management and potentially law enforcement to arrive. Under no circumstances was I to confront the intruder or attempt to handle the situation on my own. The morning brought a flurry of activity as building management, police, and IT security specialists descended on the Cascadia Financial Center. What they discovered was that the unauthorized occupant had been far more sophisticated and organized than I'd initially realized. This wasn't just someone seeking shelter, it was someone who had systematically compromised building security and been conducting extensive unauthorized activities. The person had been living in a modified storage area on the 16th floor, complete with sleeping arrangements, food storage, and personal belongings that suggested months of occupancy. They had tapped into building utilities, accessed computer networks using stolen credentials, and even been using company resources to conduct what appeared to be identity theft and financial fraud operations. Most disturbing was the discovery that this person had been monitoring my activities as closely as I was supposed to be monitoring the building. They had access to the security camera system and had been tracking my rounds, learning my patterns, and timing their activities to avoid detection. In some ways, they knew the building's security vulnerabilities better than I did. The investigation revealed that the unauthorized occupant was a former employee of one of the companies that had rented space in the building. He'd been terminated for cause several months earlier, but had retained access cards and system passwords that should have been deactivated when his employment ended. He'd been using this access to gradually establish a secret residence in the building, while conducting various illegal activities using company computer systems. The case became a significant wake-up call for building management about security vulnerabilities that they'd never considered. The person had been living rent-free in expensive downtown office space, using utilities and internet services without authorization, and potentially compromising the data security of multiple companies that rented space in the building. For me personally, the experience was deeply unsettling because it highlighted how vulnerable I'd been while thinking I was in complete control of building security. This person had been sharing the space with me for weeks, potentially watching me, certainly aware of my routines and schedules, while I remained completely oblivious to their presence. The psychological impact of learning that you've been unknowingly cohabiting with a stranger who's been watching your every move is difficult to describe. Every night, I'd been alone in that building, confident in my solitude and secure in my role as the sole guardian of the space. Someone else had been there, observing, planning, and conducting their own activities just floors above where I sat. Building management implemented significant security upgrades following the incident, including better camera coverage, more sophisticated access control systems, and protocols for ensuring that former employees couldn't retain building access after termination. They also hired additional overnight security personnel to ensure that no one would be working alone in the building again. But the experience fundamentally changed how I think about security and the illusion of solitude in large buildings. The Cascadia Financial Center incident taught me that determined individuals can find ways to live secretly in spaces that seem completely secure, and that the feeling of being alone doesn't necessarily reflect the reality of who might be sharing your environment. The former employee was arrested and charged with multiple crimes including trespassing, theft of services, identity theft, and computer fraud. The investigation revealed that he'd been conducting similar activities in other buildings throughout Seattle, essentially living as a corporate nomad while using stolen credentials and unauthorized access to maintain a secret lifestyle funded by various illegal activities. This case became a training example for security companies throughout the Pacific Northwest, demonstrating how easily someone with inside knowledge can compromise even sophisticated building security systems. It also highlighted the importance of thorough employee termination procedures and regular security audits to identify potential vulnerabilities. Working night security taught me that large buildings after hours are never truly empty, even when they appear to be completely vacant. There are always systems running, maintenance activities occurring, and potential hiding places for people who don't want to be found. The assumption that you're alone in a secure space can be one of the most dangerous illusions in personal safety.